Hey, Brian, this is Charlie, City of Concord. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're going to start up, I think, in 4 or 5 minutes. It might be loud here for a couple of minutes on you.
Okay, I'll put it on.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let me just run through my list and make sure I haven't forgotten something. Okay, Raftellus goes first. Raftellus goes first. Then after Raftellus, the Della makes her thing. Streetscape is Thursday night.
Okay.
I'm gonna go ahead and mute this. Charlie, is is Brian on? Councilmember King, can you hear us? Okay, somewhere up there, floating around. We got you. Okay, thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our April work session of the Concord City Council. We have one member who is on the phone here, and one on the end, John Sweat, will be here any moment. We will start off, let's see, for our presentations. These will be Thursday. We have a presentation and proclamation recognized on April 28th, 2023 as National Line Worker Appreciation Day. Presentation proclamation recognized the month of April as National Public Safety Communicators Month, and presentation proclamation recognizing the month of April as Fair Housing Month. Today, we'll have a presentation under informational items, presentation from Ref Tellis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll call on Amanda from our budget team to come up and introduce Lane. She's going to do the presentation this evening on our system development fee updates, which is a requirement by the general statutes.
Mayor, members of council, Ms. Kolchinsky, Kim. I'd like to take a minute to introduce Elaine Conti. She's the Executive Vice President with Raf Tellis, which is a consulting firm that has worked with municipalities on numerous projects for the last 30 years. City of Concord has worked with them multiple times related to water and sewer items. So she's going to be doing an informational presentation about system development fees.
Thank you, and welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council members, City leadership. Thank you for the opportunity to come and present to you today. As Amanda mentioned, we are going to be discussing system development fees. Wrong thing to touch. Let me try this.
There you go.
Okay.
Just the right button.
This right one there? Okay, perfect, thank you. The agenda for today is we are going to talk about system development fees, the impetus of the study, the process to adopt the fees, and then we're going to have an overview of the fee calculation and the resulting fees, and questions certainly along the way or at the end. So when we talk about system development fees, these are one-time charges. They're to address growth. So these are only when, for example, someone is building a new home, and these fees are a way to recoup the cost for the infrastructure, the water and sewer infrastructure that has already been built or that's going to be built to facilitate growth. So that's what we're talking about today. The current system development fees are listed on this chart. This is more to discuss briefly the fee structure, which is for residential. The residential fee right now for water and sewer is per unit. So that means, for example, if it's a single family home, it's charged per unit, as well if an apartment complex was being built, it's charged per unit. And then non-residential customers are charged based on their meter size. So the impetus of this study, in 2017, there was House Bill 436 that was passed that provided uniform authority to implement these fees. It's in Article 8 of the general statute, and it sets forth a process for establishing these fees. It requires preparation by a financial professional or licensed professional engineer. It requires that these fees be updated every 5 years, and hence why they're being studied now. And revisions have been made to the original legislation since 2017. So talk a little bit about the process to adopt these fees, and this is the same process that the city undertook back in 2017, 2018, when this legislation first came out. We calculate the system development fees, and then we document that in a written analysis. That written analysis then has to be posted to the city's website for 45 days to allow for written comment. We, as the preparer, would consider any written comments if they relate to the methodology. And then after that 45-day period, you can conduct a public hearing and then adopt the fees. So that's the process that's set forth in the legislation. So the allowed methodologies for the fees, there are 3 of them. The first is called the capacity buy-in approach. And this is where you're looking backwards. So in other words, this is when you're looking at the water and sewer infrastructure that you have already built. And what you're doing is you're estimating a value for those assets, And those, the value is based on the fixed asset records. So those are the financial asset records in your financial system. The incremental marginal cost approach is when you're looking forward. That's if you have a capital improvement plan that has a lot of capital improvement projects to address growth in the future, significant growth items. And then the third one is a combination of the two. When we looked at the capital improvement plan for the city, there were not significant growth-related projects over the next 5 years. So we have opted to use the capacity buy-in approach, which is similar to what was done last time. So the overview of the fee calculation, we first have to determine a methodology, which we said we've used the buy-in approach. We then identify the cost or the value of the facilities. We make adjustments, and we're going to walk through those. We derive a system development fee per residential service unit, and then we have to use a conversion table to establish a fee for various categories of demand, which means for larger users. So the cost of the facilities, this is using the fixed asset information. We take the net book value, which is the original cost less depreciation. So we take the net book value and then we bring it up to today's dollars using escalation factors, typically used for the water industry. We then, and that's called the replacement cost less depreciation. We do that for the water system and the sewer system. And then we have to subtract or remove certain assets that aren't allowed under the legislation. That includes things like meters, equipment, but the more significant items that get subtracted are things like contributed capital or grant funded. So when you think of developer contributions, those get removed because the city hasn't paid for those assets, so we can't ask others to pay for those either. And then the final deduction that we take is the outstanding debt principal. And the reason for that is you don't want to charge customers twice. So if they're paying the system development fee on an asset, and then they're paying a monthly water and sewer fee that's covering the debt service on that asset, you don't want to charge them twice. So that's why we remove the debt service. So we get to the net asset value, which in this case for the water is about 108 million, and then 68 million for the sewer system. Then once we do that, we're dividing by the capacity of the system to get a cost per gallon per day. And the capacity of the system for the water system is looking at the treatment plant capacity plus what you purchase from Albemarle, with the exception of right now we're limited, the treatment plant capacity is limited by the raw water intake ability. So we have reflected that because that's a limiting factor. And then on the sewer side, the capacity is representative of the capacity that you have reserved in the Water and Sewer Authority of Cabarrus County based on records from an engineering report. So we take the net value, we then divide by the capacity, and we get a cost per gallon per day. So it's $6.47 for water and $4.14 for sewer. Then what we do with that is we're basically taking that cost per gallon per day, and we have to establish the gallons used by a residential unit. So that's what this next slide does, is it calculates, it shows you how we've calculated the gallons per day for water and for sewer. And they are done separately because of the way that the systems are evaluated. So I'm going to start with the sewer side. We used information from the Water and Sewer Authority of Cabarrus County's recent engineering study that uses, it's based on the state guidelines, which is 80 gallons per day per bedroom, and that is actually a reduction from the typical state guidelines. They've received a reduction, but they base it on per bedroom. Also in the engineering report, the average bedroom for Concord was 3.5 bedrooms, so we multiply those two together, and that gives us 280 gallons per day. That's for a single family residential customer. Then on the water side, the calculation's different because that's based on the water master plan that uses a per capita per day. So that starts with a little over 55 gallons per capita per day, so that's per gallon used per person. Then we use census information. In Concord, it's about 2.8 people. We've rounded to 3. And then we apply the system peak and water loss to get us at 252 gallons per day. Then what we do with those two values, that's the gallon per day per single-family customer, is we're multiplying that by the cost per gallon per day. So you'll see that when we do that, that results in a maximum cost-justified system development fee for a single-family customer of a little over $1,600 and about $1,159 for sewer. So that's, on the sewer side, it's slightly higher than it is now, and on the water side, it's, I think, about 29% higher. Then what we do for non-residential customers is the 3/4 inch meter is the basis. That's kind of the baseline. Then we escalate those using the flow ratios for each meter size, which are standard flow ratios provided by the American Water Works Society or Association for each meter size. So that's how we have scaled those up. So you'll see for the water fee, it's about 29%, with the exception of the 10-inch meter, and that's only because the flow ratio for that we've looked at using the ultrasonic meter, which is now what the city is using as opposed to the older meters before. So that's why that one is a little more out of line than you've seen historically. And then we do the exact same thing on the sewer side. We take the 3/4 inch meter and then we scale it up by those same ratios that we did for water. Now, the one thing that is different than last time is we did calculate a multifamily fee for each residential unit. And the reason for this is on the sewer side, we were looking at it from a per bedroom basis. And so for sewer, we have looked at 80 gallons per day, but for multifamily, instead of using the 3.5 bedrooms, we've used 2, which is the minimum that the Water and Sewer Authority of Cabarrus County could use for state guidelines. It's 160 gallons per day is the minimum. So that establishes our sewer ERU for a multifamily unit. And then on the water system, we did something similar as before. We used the same 55 gallons per capita per day, but we assumed 2 people, and we derive 168 gallons per day. And similarly to what we did for single family, we apply this gallon per day for a multifamily unit times the cost per gallon per day as we did previously. And for the multifamily unit, we're saying the system development fee would be $1,088 and then $662 for sewer, which is a decrease from where we currently are for that residential per unit fee for multifamily. So the following slides kind of put it all together. This is on the water side. You'd see for the multifamily fee compared to the current fee, and then the single family fee, as well as the fee for each meter size on the water side.
Just one question. All these at 10-inch, we have this 126%. Why is that?
Yes, so when we look at these flow ratios for that the American Water Works Association has, they have different types of meters, and the city is changing out to different types of meters. So when we looked at the 10-inch, it has a different flow rate for the type of meter that you're currently using, whereas all the others were already at that level. So that's why that one is, like I said, kind of out of line with the others, but it's because of the type of meter and the flow. Sure. Yes.
This is the adjustment that will then carry forward.
That's correct. That's correct. And then it's similar on the sewer side. You'll see the differences, and then 10-inch is the same. Any questions?
From council?
Go ahead, JC.
And I'm known to ask unfair questions. I was in a meeting on one of our affordable housing developments, and we were looking at our line item sewer connections and water. And our developer builder pointed out that ours are much less than Charlotte's. And, you know, I can look at a 1-inch sewer is like 9,000 for a system development fee, not a connection fee. Why would Charlotte be able, I mean, we're basically all doing the same thing. Any idea?
Yeah, so on the sewer side specifically, your system is the collection system and the transmission system to, not YSAC. So that's that. And then just in general, because they do vary, you know, I get this question a lot, they do vary from municipality to municipality. It does all depend on the capacity, you know, the investment you've made in the system, the gallons per day, you know, your usage characteristics. So they can vary some, but the biggest difference on sewer is that we don't have treatment in here, just collection and transmission. Sure.
Other questions? Yes, Jennifer.
I don't have a question, but I think, you know, there's a lot of talk about this right now, that I think a lot of these bills that we're seeing in the General Assembly right now are not necessarily on these things, but I think this is a really important point to make, that this is driven legislatively. There's a lot of, I guess, ratchets in here, that you will, to make sure that this is done well. And yet we're seeing these bills that are coming out of Raleigh right now that is, you know, we're trying to, from an affordability perspective, that they're kind of hitting municipalities, that it's, and yet, I don't know, it's just challenging, I guess, is what I'm saying. And I think this is just proof that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And I think the challenge also becomes in that I do believe that, I mean, you said it best, like, this is based on new growth. And those are the individuals that are supposed to pay that part of it, of becoming part of the city. Now, I don't disagree from an affordability perspective. You know, are there grants that we can look at? There's a couple of bills I know that have proposed that. I think those are great ideas to offset the cost, but the cost is the cost. And I just kind of wanted to bring that up to every person in the room that I know already knows that, so.
Other thoughts, comments? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Lloyd, how does this all move forward?
Well, I'll defer to Elaine. Elaine, did you have a time frame up here for the implementation on this?
I know that
I know you had a slide in here about the requirement for the advertisement or public
previously where it talks
notification,
about the
and then
45 days.
45 days for a public
Yeah, I
hearing.
know that I think we're posting the report, I think, next week, early next week, and then from there, 45 days, and then I believe, I think we're having the public hearing June 8th. Does that sound? June 8th would be the public hearing. And
Same
then-
as the budget
Right,
process.
and then they would,
so.
then you could adopt them and be effective July 1st.
Okay, thank you. That's our question.
Thank you.
All right. We will have a streetscape update on Thursday. Moving into public hearings. Number one, conduct a public hearing. Consider adopting agency plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll call on Della, our new housing director, to come up and present this item to council.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council, Mr. Payne, Ms. Kozinski. The Housing Department is required to submit our agency plan annually, every year, 75 days prior to the beginning of the fiscal year. It has been made available for public review and comment. We have not received any. I have also met with our resident council and presented it to them. They had very few comments. This is the public hearing for the adoption prior to sending it to HUD.
Any questions from council? All right. Thank you. Number two, conduct a public hearing, consider approval amendment to the agreement between the City of Concord and Bootsmead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Call on Sue to present this item this evening.
Mayor, council members, Mr. Payne, Ms. Kozinski, this item is to conduct a public hearing and then consider the approval of the amendment to the agreement between the City of Concord and Bootsmead. What this amendment does is it increases the estimated cost of the Phase 2 construction from $3 million to $4.5 million. And then it also authorizes the release of any escrow funds that are above that 4.5 million.
Question from council? All right, thank you. Number 3, conduct a public hearing, consider adopting ordinance amending Article 7.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kevin from the Planning Department will come up. He's going to cover items 3 and 4 here under public hearings.
Afternoon, Mayor, members of council, Mr. Payne, Ms. Kolchinsky. This item is a fairly minor text amendment to increase the maximum impervious surface in the RC zoning district from 0.5 to 0.6. Just as kind of a preface, the impervious surface is the improvements on a lot where water cannot seep in, such as driveways, roof coverage, patios, et cetera, et cetera. And going back for several years with the adoption of our land use plan, we've been looking at ways to foster infill development, which is essentially those parcels that are left over that have not been developed for whatever reason. And so in order to make more efficient use of the land, these may need higher impervious surface ratios. Instead of extending water and sewer out to the hinterlands, we want to take advantage of some of the land we have inside the city. And those of you that were on the PTT, you may remember when we worked through our rear load townhome requirements and design standards, we all know rear loads are more desirable, but we found out that one of the disadvantages to those is they can have higher impervious surface coverage than front load. And basically that's due to the alley that runs through the back of the lots, and potentially a higher unit yield that gives you more impervious surface coverage. And again, that issue was discussed back at the PTT as a drawback to having rear load townhomes. And stormwater regulations, those are those requirements that say at what densities you have to maintain and treat stormwater. Those sort of work hand in hand with impervious surface requirements. And you see the 2 illustrations that we use at the PTT meetings, the one on the left, front load townhomes, the one on the right, rear load townhomes, and the one on the right does have slightly more impervious surface. And so here's
For the audience, PTT.
planning technical team. That was the steering committee for our land use plan. We used those a little after the adoption of the land use plan to review some of our code amendments. So, but you knew you were on it. That's the important.
Yeah, he knew he's on it.
Yeah. So here's a perfect real world example of a parcel, which on the left shows our current requirements for RC zoning, and on the right shows if you bump it up to 58% or 60%. To the left, you see some of the disadvantages. In order to maintain that 50% impervious surface, you've got a larger area of pervious and open space, which is good in a lot of ways. But what it does is it's pushing the several of these units to not have direct access to a parking space, and you have your much of your required parking is on-street parking, which to a certain degree is good, but you don't want all of it there. And you have a cut through from one street to the other. And on the right, if you bump it up to 60%, you have pretty much all of these units would have frontage on a parking space. It would be much more efficient. You wouldn't have the cut through going from one street to the other. So it's a little bit better design, and it's a perfect example of one thing in the code when you take it one way may cause a disadvantage in another. So we looked when we were going through this code to see where we stand with our impervious surface coverage, which is 50% in RC. So this is what we found. Kannapolis is at 50, Fayetteville is 55, Greenville, South Carolina, they're having a ton of redevelopment and infill development is at 60, Durham is at 60, Raleigh's at 65, Chapel Hill's at 70. Winston-Salem, they have some pretty innovative infill criteria. They're between 70 and 85, and Asheville has none that I could find. And I think they probably solve that by just simply through their open space requirements for certain types of development. So what we're proposing is a reasonably minor change to table 7.6.2A, where we increase the impervious surface coverage in RC from 0.5 to 0.6, but only for multi-unit projects that meet the definition of infill. And so that's using it like a lot of other jurisdictions do. And that infill definition basically says the development of new housing or other buildings on scattered vacant sites surrounded by developed areas. And just as a note, all of the development would still be required to meet all the minimum city stormwater requirements for retention and treatment and all the other development requirements. And from a planning perspective, we don't think that an increase of 10% of impervious surface, when you have to treat the stormwater anyway, is really going to make a great deal of difference, particularly when it's in an infill situation. So this item was reviewed by Planning Commission. They unanimously adopted it. They adopted this statement of consistency. Basically, the proposal is consistent with the 2030 land use plan. In this section 5.2 states that the city should foster infill and redevelopment. Furthermore, Goal 9 contains several policies and objectives relative to infill development options. And they found that the proposal is reasonable and that it allows for the development of infill housing and redevelopment. So your options would be to consider the text amendment, approve that statement of consistency, and make a motion to adopt or not adopt the proposed revisions.
Questions? All right, thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Number 4, conduct public hearing considering adopting ordinance annexing 2.3 acres.
So this item is a voluntary annexation petition for 3760 Zion Church Road. And just to orient you, 3760 Zion Church Road, to the west of the property is Central Cabarrus High School. Directly to the north off of the map is NC Highway 49. The owners are actually Lorraine and Susan Bird, but the person that is looking to develop the property is Joshua Masters with Long Range Development and Properties. It's 2.3 acres and it's currently zoned Cabarrus County LDR, low density residential, and they're looking to have RV zoning applied to it in order to build a triplex, which is a three housing units under one roof. So here's the zoning map. You see it's in the middle of County LDR, OI to the west, County MDR over to the east. And just a note, here's the aerial. A few facts about the property. There's no access to sewer for this parcel. It's about 400 feet away on one side and I think 300 on the other, so it meets the criteria of not having connect to our sewer system. They're not proposing to subdivide, so they wouldn't have to connect to the sewer system. And it's my understanding that they've had a perk test done on the property and it does perk. So they would be using septic tank if the zoning is approved. It's in the area of the central area plan. It's in that boundary. And the low-density residential designation of the central area plan restricts it to 2 units per acre. As proposed, they're proposing 1.3 dwelling units an acre. So they're within that cap of the maximum number of dwelling units per acre. Additionally, as you see, it's a flag lot, it's got a long skinny pole going out to Zion Church Road. It's an existing lot of record. It's been that way for quite some time. Just as a note, if this were in the city, the only way to get this flag lot would be to have some type of extenuating circumstance, existing development. It would have to go through Development Review Committee to sort of have I hate to use the term waiver, but sort of a hardship exception to use that flag lot if it were new and coming in the city. But it would just be merely non-conforming to our zoning if it were to come in terms of adding additional units or so on and so forth. The 2030 land use plan designates the property as suburban neighborhood, which is basically our medium range residential designation. You see it's in the middle of a suburban neighborhood area, so RV zoning would be consistent. And so your next steps would be to consider the annexation request, adopt it or deny it. And if you were to annex it, we would have consideration before Planning Commission for RV rezoning. And we have noticed this annexation. To my knowledge, we've not received any calls or any inquiries about the petition.
And they are close to our water?
I don't know the answer to that one. Are you? Okay, yeah. I know this. I didn't turn on the water layer. I looked at the sewer and it was a ways away.
And that doesn't present any problems by them having having a septic tank?
No, sir.
Okay, any questions? Okay,
Why do they want to be in the city if they can't get sewer and they have a septic tank and
Probably to get the 3 dwelling units. Because I think under county zoning, they'd be limited to 1.
So the county that they've got now would be 1 dwelling unit on that lot?
Yes, sir.
The county, excuse me, go ahead.
Well, I'm just gonna veer off. What about waste collection? How are we gonna manage that?
Yeah.
We're gonna
Question.
run down Zion Church to pick up
I was gonna ask the
2
same
cans?
question.
I mean, to my understanding, they would have to roll out all the way down that flag to
But we're not,
Zion Church.
They're gonna have a truck to get it out to the street, yeah. That's the question I had.
so it
How
would
we gonna
still,
do
so
that?
we would still, because it's a multi-family unit, even though it's 3, that's still considered under our,
Yeah, I mean, with it being in the city, our obligation is to provide them services like any other citizen would have. So yes, we would
Yeah.
have to ride down Zion Church to get the
The
refuse.
county won't allow zoning to be changed to go to 3 units then?
I don't know if they've tried.
Tried it?
I've
Okay, we don't know the answer to that question.
I don't know the answer.
can you go back to the
sir.
image again? That's fine.
That's,
So we don't have any
yeah, let's
city,
get ready to say it.
this butts up to city, but we have nothing along Zion Church Road in that area.
No, sir.
Well, if I may, one more question. What I said a minute ago about the county, if they're not willing to rezone it, why should we be willing to rezone it if it's not been tested, with the services that we'll have to render? I
It
think
seems to me this is almost like one of those little islands
it is an island.
that we've said we don't like doing. I mean, it's just,
Well,
all there by
the
itself.
services are ludicrous to go all the way out there.
It is contiguous to the west, but along the main road. And to your point, Mr. Crawford, one of the reasons we discourage flag lots is because of the service issue. And
Yeah. Should we, let me ask this question. Is it fair to say this? It may not be, but I'll ask it anyway. Would we not want them to go to county first to see if they could get the zoning changed to 3 units before we even hear this again? And see what the outcome of that is? Is that fair?
I think we have to make a decision and then we can make a
Then force it?
suggestion.
Okay,
but
force it.
We can't, yeah, we
Can't mandate it, but we could force it though.
We can say no to this.
Yeah, I think you could force it, Councilmember, by saying no to the,
By saying
the
no,
request for
I guess that's
annexation.
what I really meant to say, but nicely. So,
All right, any more questions? Okay, thank you, Kevin. Number 5, conduct public hearing case Z0123.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ask Alden to come up from our planning department to go through the staff report with council.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, Mr. Payne, Ms. Kolchinsky, Ms. Deason. This is case Z0123 for 1089 Gaither Place. This case was presented to P&Z at their March meeting. And as this is a rezoning with concurrent land use plan amendment, it's been referred to council for approval or denial. So the location, as I mentioned, is 1089 Gaither Place. It is 0.23 acres. It is on the south side of Davidson Highway. If you are looking at this picture and you were to go to the left, you would go towards 85. To the right goes towards Central Drive Northwest, as well as Highway 29. It's currently zoned RC Residential Compact, and the applicant is proposing C2 General Commercial for a daycare serving children with special needs. However, it should be noted that this is a straight rezoning, so all permitted uses within the C2 zoning classification would be allowed. And again, this shows the existing conditions. The subject property is here in the red squares. You can see that it is surrounded by C2. The adjacent property directly to the west is C2, as are a couple more to the west, and then we have residential there going towards Central Drive. I do also want to note that the house that is currently on the property would be used as the daycare center. Our land use plan has this, it's considered an urban neighborhood. However, C2 is not listed as a corresponding zoning classification. So along with the zoning map amendment, the land use plan would need to be amended to commercial. The statement of consistency here on the left, you can see the supporting approval from P&Z. I did also provide the converse language as well, if you were going to support denial. So the next steps here would be to approve or amend the statement of consistency, approve or deny the zoning map amendment, and approve or deny the land use amendment.
So let me be clear, we're not approving a daycare, we're approving it to become commercial that they indicate will be daycare, but there's no reason they have to do that once we do that rezoning.
That is correct.
Couple of slides. So
Which one do we stop at?
that's perfect.
This one? Okay.
Yep, that's great. So you see where it says subject property? So the front piece that's the kind of fronts Davidson Highway, that square that's there,
Yes.
is that, I'm assuming that's a separate
It is a
landowner?
separate vacant lot.
And it's just a vacant lot?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Would another way for them is to go for conditional use?
They could go for conditional use, yes.
And then we wouldn't have to change the zoning, we would just give it conditional use to do the daycare.
Right. So they would have to go back through P&Z, but yes.
Yep.
P&Z.
Yep.
But to be clear, P&Z recommended approval and referred to us.
That is correct.
Was there anyone there to speak against this rezoning when we heard this?
There was not, and we have not received any phone calls to speak against this either.
Okay, other questions? Gary, you got anything?
Why did P&Z do the conditional scenario?
Yeah, I knew you were heading that way. They had a lot of conversations about it, and the reason, frankly, is the size of the lot. It's really long and narrow. It's very tough to do a lot of the undesirable things that could happen in C2. Whereas the case that's being pulled from your agenda, the next item, I think it's next time or the one after, it's the exact opposite. It was very large. That was troubling the planning commission, and they voted to recommend denial for that one, and they voted to recommend this one after that discussion with the lot size. And that was kind of their driving factor. No, sir, it was unanimous recommendation. Yep. But that's what made this one a little different. Okay, I stand corrected. There was one dissent.
Steve, can you flip
One-
back to the zoning map, Charlie? Thank you.
Yeah, true. We're just chatting here about setbacks for residential versus commercial. Is there anything, if they did conditional use, would it?
No, sir, but because it's still gonna be commercial to commercial, and then where it abuts to residential.
Okay.
It's gonna be the same buffering.
Did she say the house was going to be used for the daycare, I guess, for lack of another way of putting it? So what's the rest of the land going to have on it? Just land? Nothing on top of it?
Well, that's a pretty narrow lot, so
where
where that house sits, there is a backyard that's been fenced
So
in.
just for play area or whatever. So nothing's
Yeah.
going to be built on it then? Yeah, it is a playground, I see.
Yeah, if you see there's not a lot left
Yeah.
without tearing the house down.
And of course, it does back up to commercial.
I don't see a
Correct.
problem, yeah.
It does, but I will say John just made a really good point in saying, doesn't mean that they can't sell that property off, and it does butt up to the rest of the commercial behind it.
That's correct.
And it couldn't be engulfed in that.
That's
So
correct.
I think that's a good point to make.
Yep, could be much larger.
Yeah, yeah. I think we have something to consider. We have something to consider. All right. Item 6 has been withdrawn, so that moves us up to petitions and requests. Number 1, consider approving allocating $80,000 of home investment partnership.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have Mary coming up. She's going to handle items 1 and 2 for council this evening.
Mayor, members of council, Mr. Payne, Ms. Kolchinsky, the item that I am covering this evening is the allocation of home funds from Habitat for Humanity of Cabarrus County. This is a partnership that has been in existence for 10 years, and during that time frame, the co-investment of funding has allowed 15 families to purchase homes, and those families are at 50% or below area median income. The request from Habitat is $40,000 for the construction of a home at 285 Academy and an additional $40,000 for construction of a home at 291 Academy. They will confirm, they will be consistent with the same construction standards that they have been, that community development does follow as far as hardy plank siding, conditional crawl space, and so on. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. Question from council? All right, thank you very much. Item 2, consider a motion to approve purchase of 4 locations in McGill in a vacant lot.
And this property was presented to council in January during the planning session. Just to reorient council with where this property is located, it is 3 parcels. The 2 front parcels do have structures on them, and they front McGill. The property, the buildings do flank Allison Street and the vacant lot that is in the rear. Staff has been continuing conversations with potential partners for this program. You'll notice some of the facts that are on the screen did come from the National Restaurant Association regarding success rate for businesses. The next is from Flywheel, which has been identified as a partner for this program. For their educational program, they have identified at least 33% of all inquiries to their program is related to the food and beverage industry. Of those, 70% are African American female. And they have found, them along with the National Restaurant Association, have found that if a restaurant goes through an education piece along with an incubator space, their success rate almost doubles. And then the last piece of data that is on there is from the Community Design Indicators from Cabarrus Health Alliance, and that is related to accessibility to fresh fruits and vegetables. The first one is that 66% of folks that are specifically in Concord city limits live farther than a half mile from a grocery store. Below that, just over 3% live within a half mile of a farmer's market. Now, you may be wondering why I made sure to put those factoids in there. It is because that this particular property, Gibson Village, is located within a food desert. The city of Concord has 2, one in Logan and one in Gidsville. The red dot on the screen does identify the property that we are proposing to purchase on McGill. And you can see the definition for a food desert. It is a tract in which at least 100 households are located more than a half a mile to the nearest supermarket and have no vehicle access, or at least 500 people, or 33% of the population, live more than 20 miles from the nearest grocery store, regardless of vehicle accessibility. The design changes from those conversations with potential partners has modified the site a little bit. We have identified the need for a food hub that would be specifically to bring fresh fruits and vegetables to the area. There's currently a once-a-week market with the Bulb, and we are discussing the partnership with them. We would be looking at them to handle the food hub piece of this. And the food hub would basically be there to manage, facilitate, store, and distribute those locally or regionally produced fresh fruits and vegetables. So as you notice, the right parcel on that initially had, there were other shipping containers in that parcel. We have changed that a little bit. Still has the drive-through capabilities, but we've changed it more for a farmer's market food hub. Accessibility. There is an open air market which would have stalls for either the food hub or farmer's market, depending on how the space continues to change. There is that designated drive-through pickup station, which you notice is at the top left of that parcel. This could also potentially be a partnership with some of the other local food banks, but with the food hub, their focus is on that fresh fruits and vegetable piece, not on those shelf-stable products. But they could be brought into this conversation as well. The other change, as you notice to the left side, is that it is a semi-conditioned space, so we have altered that to be a hard roof that would allow for some type of heat and some type of air. For the reason for that is because some of the partners had expressed their concern about limitations of being able to use this, and so having the space semi-conditioned would allow for the space to be used all but the hottest of hot days and the coldest of cold days. Updates, we are currently in process with a Phase 1 environmental. This is not complete and would be complete before closing, and should there be any significant issues that are found, we would see exactly what it would be to address that, or either walk away if we could not address that feasibly financially. Jennifer Emu with the Ferguson Group has worked with staff to submit a funding request to Representative Adams and also to Senator Tillman, and Ms. Adams has selected this project as one that she will be submitting. The cost of that request is $656,000, which does cover the initial site setup. That would be development, the retaining wall, purchase and installation of the shipping containers, so on. Identified partners, Flywheel Foundation, they would be focused on the educational piece. During our conversations with them, it was sort of serendipitous. They are looking at a food industry education piece because of the amount of food and beverage inquiries that they have found. So this comes along at sort of the perfect timing for them. Rowan Cabarrus Community College is the first ones that we had reached out to, and they are definitely interested in partnering, very willing to be that point of contact for students, along with Flywheel, and also partnering with Flywheel for the educational piece. CHA, as their focus is on healthy food and education, they along with Flywheel are in conversations about potentially being the manager or partnering managers for this facility. No one's stepped up to the plate yet, but we're still talking to them. And then the Bulb, we're bringing them in. They are very excited about this opportunity, and they would be the food hub organizer as they currently work with one in Charlotte. Again, and there is one other update. There is an EDA grant that has been identified, and staff will be having conversations with the regional rep tomorrow morning to make sure that this project would be eligible and start that process of applying for that economic development grant. Tax value for the properties are $293,500, and the owner has agreed to an offer of $200,000 due to the condition of the buildings. I am happy to answer any questions.
That was a lot of information.
Amen.
Let me see if I got it all. Alma Adams is putting money up or trying to get the money to do demolishing of all the structures that are on there now?
She would do if approved, that would cover the demolition, it would cover the site improvements, the retaining wall needed for the parking area, and then also for the structures.
Okay, can you go back to that one,
Sure
please?
can.
So, right there, yeah. So the one on the left, all the parking is in the back, that's obvious. In the front piece then, what is in there again? I'm missing something. What's going to be in there related to restaurants or?
So in the red are actually the shipping containers, and those are the potential to be a common kitchen area for educational purposes. They would also be rented out as that incubator space for the businesses. And then as it goes on the right side, the double shipping containers could potentially be used for educational piece if the left side is fully occupied, or it may be used for storage for the food hub.
Good. So that left side could be, I mean, there would be flight wheel type mentor programs in there for restaurants and for that kind of thing? Okay.
Yes.
That'd be cool, because we don't have that right now. We don't have a facility, we're part of that.
Right.
And we don't have a facility for that right now, so
No,
that's
and
cool.
Flywheel does not. That's why they're very eager to be a part of the conversations for
So
this.
the city's investment is 200,000 then?
Yes.
I mean, that's basically granting that to them. We're gonna,
200,000 would be to purchase the property.
are we giving them the property then?
Not at this point.
Okay,
I can't do that.
okay, I understand. But, I mean, is the intent to do that? To get this started, or do we know? Is there anybody?
We
who can
haven't
answer that?
got that far yet.
We haven't gotten that far yet, okay.
I think, Councilman, to be determined, I think that the first step for us was because of all of the code violations on the properties listed was to get the property, clean
out
it
of there,
up, and then talk with other partners, as Mary mentioned on here, about how can we do this? Is there other funding, such as Representative Adams getting us funding for the property, and then talking about who would manage this? It's not our intent for the city to manage this on an ongoing basis, but rather to be able to hand off a product that's sustainable for the community.
Well, for someone that travels that, every time I come here,
Me
for
too.
starters, every time I go home from here, for starters, and any other time I go downtown, it's worth the effort just to clean that area up. It's just gonna be a windfall for that area. What's it going to do to our little lady that had her mindset it was a Gibson, something that presented to us about her farmer's market there, 43,000 that she requested. Is this an impact on that, or?
This will definitely not be an impact on that this fiscal year.
Okay, will not be an impact.
Will not be an
Okay.
impact on that. And
Yes, yes, Betty.
Question, connecting to what Terry just asked. So in your list of partners, can you go back to that
yes, ma'am.
slide? I mean, I think it would be beneficial if Gibson Village,
I actually have a meeting set with
Big time beneficial.
Gibson Village next week.
okay,
Part of the reason why I waited was to make sure that we had sort of a definite idea. Because I have been in those communities where conversations have started and great, wonderful ideas, but we haven't got the buy-in from partners. And the community the community loses trust. And so to prevent that, I wanted to make sure that we had those buy-in from the partners. We had the conversation with council. Council was willing to step forward with this project. And then our next intent is to bring the community in and get considerable amount of community input. Because
understood.
us driving through is one thing. I don't live there. I can walk on a porch, I can sit in a driveway, I can stand on somebody's porch and look out with them, but I don't live there. And so until I have that person who lives there telling me, yes, this is gonna be a good thing for us, or this is not gonna be a good thing for us, that's when we can move forward.
thank you, I live there. Another question, can you go back to the slide where it shows the building? Now, where's the parking gonna be exactly?
So the parking would be, right now, is tentatively set behind the shipping containers and behind the covered area. As you notice, to the left side, the highlighted area, that is actually a considerable dip. And so to get adequate parking in there, there will have to be an engineered retaining wall put in, which initial conversations, that's absolutely doable. And then the parking would be behind the facility. Now, for the farmer's market, parking would be over there, but if it's a drive-through situation, folks would simply come off the street and exit onto Allison Street.
Okay, and to make sure I have my bearings right, so this property is where the travel agency used to be, next to the Peacock?
No, ma'am, this is
Painting?
the next building. It's the next one's closer to downtown. So, let's see if I can find the
That's
little
used to be a
red dot.
furniture store there.
Oh, sorry,
Well,
Charlie.
We lost it.
The property to the right is actually Upper Room Ministries.
Okay,
Kerr Street is actually going to be down below to the left.
Use curve.
There you go. So Kerr Street is in this area.
Right there.
Peacock is sitting right about here.
okay. All right,
Yes, yes.
I think I'll have to go back and do a site visit. So where outreach, upper room outreach ministry is,
Be this
and then
area.
coming down McGill,
Mhm.
there's,
It's gonna be the
it used to be a
first road to the
furniture
right.
store there on the corner. It's empty
The
now.
furniture store.
Okay, all right.
This is that
And
property.
then crossing the street,
There was a hair salon, beauty salon.
okay,
I think it was a shoe store next to that, and I have no idea about the third one.
okay, all right.
There's a bar in here now.
And just any thought as to, you think this will be a good mix for the existing businesses there? I think there's a barber shop farther down, and I'm not sure if it's a restaurant.
There is a restaurant.
A restaurant.
It's a restaurant bar. We have not had those conversations with those business owners, but the whole point of this is to bring investment into that corridor. And as a business owner, this is going to be my personal opinion, which is, take it for what it's worth. My grandmother said, everybody has an opinion just like a nose. Sometimes they just don't know where to keep them, which is me. But my opinion as a business owner, having that influx of people coming in for the different variations would be a good thing for me because there would be more foot traffic.
Okay, that's,
This may be premature too, but who'd be the managing entity of this?
Every conversation that we've had with partners, we have made it perfectly clear that the city of Concord does not want to be the
Right,
manager of this.
that's what Lloyd made that clear.
So at this point, Flywheel is willing to be
Flywheel.
that partner, but if they can find someone else who is willing to do that, they will work with them either as a managing partner or they will, step back and let them handle it. CHA has said that they would have discussions about that as well. So, as I said, we've not identified that managing partner yet, but we do at least have one agency that is willing to take it on.
Yeah, I mean, those are all steps 2, 3, 4, 5 probably, but step 1, let's get control, right?
Yep.
So,
Steve, whenever Steve talked to you, he said he was very high level. I am just barely below that.
Any more questions? Yes, go ahead. I think that's a good point. All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item. Number 3, consider awarding a bid rehabilitation of hangar taxiways.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. This is another exciting project at Concord Regional Airport. What you have in front of you, Mayor, members of council, Mr. Payne, Ms. Kolchinsky, is a project with rehabilitation, taxi lane. We took bids on March the 23rd, received 3 bids. After careful review and evaluation by our engineers, we are recommending Blythe Brothers. They've been responsive and meeting all the specifications. The total bid and 6 bid alternatives is an amount of $3,592,033.00. Funding will come from Federal Aviation Administration, North Carolina Department of Transportation, and our retained earnings. We are recommending awarding the bid to Blythe Brothers and authorize the city manager to accept and execute grant offer from FAA and NCDOT.
Any questions? One question, taxi lanes and taxiways.
Yes, sir. So taxi lane
Yes.
is access to a to a T hangar and corporate hangars. There's
Okay.
approximately 9 taxi lanes that we have.
So this is off the active runway.
Yes, sir. This will be a non-movement area.
Gotcha. All right. Well, the name. I know where I can be and where I can't be, and that's one of the places I can be. I do know that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 4, consider authorizing city manager to negotiate and execute a contract with Kimley Horn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ask George, our Greenway planner, to come up and talk about an exciting project to move our Clark Creek Greenway ahead. So, George?
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council, Mr. Payne, Ms. Kolchinsky, and Ms. Deason. Before you this afternoon is a request to authorize the city manager to approve a contract with Kimley Horn Associates in the amount of $515,000 for professional services for full design, of the 1.6-mile Phase A of the future Clark Creek Greenway, including environmental assessment, agency permitting, construction documents, and bid documentation, and for environmental assessment and design development for phases B and C, which are 2.3 and 1.3 miles in length respectively of the project, including reimbursable expenses. The map on your screens identifies Phase A in red, Phase B in green, and Phase C in blue. The Clark Creek Greenway is identified as a priority greenway corridor in the adopted open space connectivity analysis and is a crucial element for meeting the City Council's goal of having 30 miles of connected greenway trails and sidewalks by the year 2030. Approximately 1,000 households are within a quarter mile of this greenway corridor. Close to 2,000 are within a half mile. And when completed, the full 5.2-mile Clark Creek Greenway will directly connect the Allen Mills, Winding Walk, Highland Creek, Kristenberry, Granary Oaks, and Edenton neighborhoods with the future J.E. Jim Ramseur Park, Cox Mill Elementary and High Schools, and the Carolina International School, the future Poplar Tent Trailhead Park, and from there, crossing into the Rocky River Basin with a future connection to the Hector H. Henry Greenway system. The preliminary design phase, conceptual alignment, surveying and floodplain modeling, was approved in May 2022 and recently completed. Full design and real estate acquisition are the next steps prior to construction. In January, this project was awarded a $1.55 million federal congestion mitigation and air quality grant through NCDOT and the Cabarrus-Rowan MPO to assist with Phase A construction. That federal construction funding needs to be expended by the end of September 2025 unless we need an extension. Among many other important transportation and recreational benefits, Phase A of this project provides 2 bridges over Clark Creek, permitting school children from the Highland Creek, Winding Walk, and Allen Mills neighborhoods to walk or ride from their homes to Cox Mill Elementary and high schools, reducing both congestion and improving air quality in the area. Just to reiterate, Phase A is the priority section since funding is associated with the CMAQ grant. Moving forward with 50% design for phases B and C will assist staff with site control and will help us identify the timeline for future development. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right.
All right, thank you.
Number 5, consider authorizing city manager to negotiate and execute a contract with Central Carolina Air Conditioning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next 3 items, Kevin Plemons, our Deputy Water Resource Director, is going to come and present these to council.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Mr. Payne, Ms. Kolzinski, Ms. Deason. This first item is for a contract with Central Carolina Air Conditioning Company to replace a dust collector that we have at Cottle Creek Water Treatment Plant. The one that's there is original vintage, approximately 30 years old. So this is to replace that system with a new upgraded system.
Got it. Number 6, while you're up, considering authorizing city manager to negotiate and execute a contract with AM Liner.
This item is for the sewer lining that we're doing. This comes in a little over what the original budget was, but after speaking with finance, we have the money to cover all of that. Of course, with everything, prices keep going up.
Hey, without putting you on spot, by relining, how many years more does it give to a sewer line? Just a
You
rough
essentially are making a new line. These are structural liners, so it's essentially building a new pipe within the existing pipe.
number.
So
20
it could be
years,
50 plus years.
Yeah, 50-plus years by doing it this way at a fraction of the cost.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions? All right. And number 7, consider approval of resolution to lease property from long-term Selco.
This is an item that you have already approved the contract on. This is an action that needs to be taken due to the term of the contract. Anything beyond 10 years that it does require an action from council.
So nothing's changed from what we were discussing before.
None at all.
Any questions, council?
I believe it's 40 is what this one goes to, correct?
It's, I don't have it in front of me, but it's a period of time with a bunch of possible extensions, and you have to count all of the possible length of the lease.
Okay.
Any questions? Thank you.
Any questions? No questions? Thank you, Kevin. Number 8, consider authorizing Transportation Department to apply carbon reduction program.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ask Philip to go over this item with council this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Mr. Payne, Ms. Kolczynski, Ms. Deason. This is, the Transportation Department is indeed requesting to apply for carbon reduction program funding through our MPO call for projects. It is to replace our traffic signal system within the city. The carbon reduction program is part of the IIJA infrastructure through Federal Highway. The Transportation Department, we maintain over 160 NCDOT signals within the city, which means we have the central system that ties together all those signals back to our traffic management center. And by agreement with NCDOT, we have managed those signals. So the North Carolina DOT is currently pursuing a different platform to meet their 2030 goals. Those goals include traffic signal or transit signal priority, emergency preemption, integration with future connected and autonomous vehicles. So their new platform will be able to integrate those in future needs as that technology arises. And with the new system, there will be upgrades to all the signal cabinets, preliminary engineering, and so forth. So these funds are to cover that. We're requesting $1.5 million for a total project cost. Our participation in that would be around $300,000 or a 20% match in the project. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from council? All right. Thank you, Philip. Number 9, consider approving a City of Concord co-sponsorship policy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I call on Ian, Emergency Management Director, to come up and give a report to council. This is an item that various staff members have been working on for several months now, so I'm happy that it's come to this point to present it to council for approval, hopefully on Thursday. So Ian, if you would.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor, members of council, Mr. Payne, Ms. Kolczynski, Ms. Deason. The co-sponsorship policy in discussion this evening explains the application process when external entities request co-sponsorship from city for particular events. The process will consist of applications coming through the Emergency Management Office to be reviewed, then reaching out to applicable departments to determine staff and resource availability for the applicant's requested date and particular event. Once that information is determined, a cost estimate for staff hours and equipment will be compiled, brought before council with a recommendation from staff for you, council, to approve or deny city co-sponsorship for a particular event. Happy to answer any questions for you.
Any question from council?
I have a question about how many of these do you think, Ian, that we'll be approving or denying or seeing a year?
We don't know. I know in discussion with everyone with the new construction downtown, it will probably ramp that up quite a bit.
So I think timing is good on this.
Yes, sir.
Any more questions? Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Number 10, consider authorizing city manager to negotiate and execute a contract for Lyles Construction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sue will handle items 10 and 11 for council this evening.
Yes, sir. Mayor, council members, Mr. Payne, Ms. Kolczynski. This first item is the shelter for the pump house at the golf course. It has ended its useful life. So we received and got 4 bids for the replacement of that. And so the low bid is Lyles Construction, $134,641.
Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you. Number 11, consider preliminary application from John and Barbara Hawley Jr.
So yes, sir, we received an application for water and sewer service outside the city limits. It's at 5405 Kiwi Court. Kiwi Court backs up to, it's adjacent to Campbell Farm subdivision, and it also backs up to St. Andrews. The applicant has indicated that her septic lines have been damaged by a utility company, not city utility company, another utility company, has drove over the leach fields. She's been working with the Cabarrus Health Alliance. The company has tried to repair them, but they're still not operating correctly. And so we don't have water and sewer on her particular road, but however, she's requesting to see if she would be allowed to get service, if she could get a private lateral easement from her neighbors in St. Andrews and be able to get connection that way. And so the reason for the request is because of the damage to her septic fields.
Okay, question from council.
Oh, yes, ma'am, it would be, our ordinance requires that they get the easement, it's actually recorded, it's a recorded document, and before we would allow her to sign up.
This conditional her getting.
Well, correct, but our ordinance requires that, so, yeah.
And then who pays to run it through the easement area to her?
She does. She has to pay her plumber. So our responsibility for our service line, is just from the main to the right of way, and then her plumber does the rest.
How far is she from city limits?
Well, she's in a subdivision, so Kiwi Court, I don't have the name of the subdivision right in front of me, so we couldn't require annexation because it is an established subdivision. You can't annex just one lot out of the subdivision. But Campbell Farms is adjacent to her, so maybe 200 feet. The Kiwi Court has rather large lots, so.
So if I got a truck to run over somebody else's, they could just go ahead and get city water and sewer, or city sewer?
Well, in St. Andrews, in that subdivision, they do have water and sewer, and that subdivision actually is in the county. It's an older subdivision. I'm not sure when it was developed.
Okay.
But not everyone, everyone is in the position she's in. She just happens to be at the end of the road, and she is adjacent to neighbors there on St. Andrews.
Okay. Just an odd situation for where she is. All right. Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Item 12, consider appointing a voting delegate to the North Carolina League of Municipalities City Vision 2023 Conference. We're going to do that tonight. I'll be glad to be that person. Hear a motion?
Motion.
Second. Okay. Ready to vote? All in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. That's it. That's it. Consent agenda. Anything you want to bring out? Nothing to bring out of consent agenda. We will be moving, we will be in recess until about 30 minutes. At 5:45, we will start with our budget presentation, correct? Anybody have anything to add before we go into recess? Nothing to add? All right, we are in recess. Thank you.